Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever we are. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes to let the delegates come in. We've got a number of delegates registered for this event, so if you give me a minute, we'll let people join. Okay, well, welcome. Good morning and good afternoon. Good evening for those of you joining from Asia. I don't think we have too many Asian delegates today, but you never know. They're welcome too. Welcome to this really unveiling ceremony almost for Showcase Outbound North America, which is an event which is taking place in March. All the details concerning the North American edition of Showcase are available on the website, and you can use the UR code there to access it, or even just access it straight through the ETOA site. Thank you very much for that, board. Let's proceed with the webinar. One thing I would say before we get going is that a number of you have sent through questions. I'm really grateful for you doing so. We will get to them, I hope, in due course. But please put comments and questions in the discussion area that you've got there. It really helps us because we know we're going to have quite an important discussion. But it really helps us getting a conversation going if people are leaving comments and questions in the Q&A or the comment area. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining me, Brett, and thank you so much for joining me, Terry. You're both old friends of ETOA and your regular appearance here. I really don't think I need to introduce you, but why don't you just introduce yourselves just in case there's someone who's not that familiar with you. Brett, please, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Brett Walker. I'm the general manager for Canada and international operations for Colette, but I also am chair of the Canadian Association of Tour Operators, CATO.
And Terry.
And Tom, it's great to be here with you. Terry Dale, I've had the honor of serving as USTOA's president and CEO for 15 years.
It seems
Time
such a short
flies.
amount of time. It's flown, Terry. I'm Tom Jenkins. For those of you fortunate enough not to know me, I'm from ETOA and I've been here longer than Terry. I think I've been here since '98, so it's closing on 30 years, but not quite. Sometimes don't draw any conclusions from that statement. Look, just as an opening gambit, North America. It lies at the soul of inbound tourism, certainly long-haul inbound tourism for Europe. It defines the industry in some ways. Much of what you see when you go around Europe and experience in terms of hotels and in terms of the itineraries and in terms of the things that people go to look at and enjoy and the way they go to look at and enjoy has been shaped by North American demand over the last 100 years. And so it is rightly the gold standard. And I would also point out that people talk about evolving markets, and all markets are important. New markets are particularly welcome. But 1 year's fluctuation in demand, more or less from North America, equals almost the entire volume of people coming from most Asian markets. So it's utterly central and critical to ETOA's membership, how well North America performs. And I think on the whole, it's been performing extremely well since COVID. And I just actually will start off, if I may, with Terry to ask him how, what is his, how does he think looking back 25 went? How did it go?
I'm happy to say, Tom, that we had a very solid year, and it goes without saying, Europe is our bread and butter. So how Europe goes is how the rest of our global membership goes. So we ended 2025 with 2/3 of our tour operator members having an increase in sales and passenger numbers. And 55% of that group had increases 10% and higher. So we started last year, January, with a pretty healthy, robust outlook. And then a term that we use in the industry all the time, it was a roller coaster ride in 25. What matters most is we ended in a very solid, healthy situation, and Europe was central to that. So we did it
Well, I
with our
mean,
good partners over there in Europe.
I, I'm just intrigued. You said it was a roller coaster. I mean, what drove the roller coaster up and down? If a roller
Well,
coaster is
you
driven up
know,
and down.
March was a critical month, and we had change of administration, and we had stock market fluctuations as well as the strength of the dollar. So we went through a somewhat of a quiet period, but then things did eventually pick up. And when they did, it was fairly strong and we ended good. We ended good, but it was a roller coaster.
Yeah, yeah. Brett, how are things from Canada?
Ditto. But yeah, it was there was some disruption for sure. And there was a lot of rhetoric which influenced a lot of travel demand. And I think everyone's aware that the north-south travel between Canada and the US was disrupted, and there was a pivot. And to Terry's point, a lot of Canadians who would have otherwise chosen to vacation south of the border either canceled and made other arrangements, and Europe benefited from that. Europe and other destinations afar. But that trans-border travel had there was a pause around that February, March time period. There's just a lot of unknowns. But when things began to settle, we found that our certainly the demand curve for Europe went up, and the year ended absolutely better than expected. Terry, I agree. Your numbers are probably from those I've talked to. I would say more in the 10 to 15% range for those companies for which Europe is important, virtually everyone. Uh, the year finished off much better than expected.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, this is heartening news. And looking forward, I mean, Brett, can I just stay with you? What are the prospects for 26?
So I think what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing is that there's a bit of a softening of demand, and I think that's because of the fact there was this extreme pit in 2025. And those people who had chosen or were choosing to travel south of the border, either Canadian snowbirds who would otherwise winter in Florida or spend time in wherever, made a conscious choice not to and travel to Europe. The 2026, because of the advanced booking window for many tour operators, as Terry and I have mentioned before, that sweet spot is somewhere between 8 to 10 months for many operators. Some it's tighter, but from the advanced booking perspective, Europe is and destinations around the world, but Europe is doing very well. I would imagine that 2026, from my perspective right now, based on how things are trending, the growth year over year isn't going to be quite as much as it was in 2026, but I would attribute that not to a lessening of demand from a Canadian perspective. I would attribute that to the big pivot that happened in 2025, and it's normalized now, but we're seeing a good growth year for 2026 for sure.
Terry.
Agreed. So first, it's important for me to share that this survey that I'm referencing was fielded in the month of October, which is like an eternity ago. So our forecast for 2026 is one that's fairly healthy. Again, three-quarters of our members are projecting growth in sales and passengers, and 55% say it'll be between 7 and 10%. And Brett had mentioned some, quiet times a little bit and some softening. That could very well be the case. But at least we enter the year with optimism, but probably cautious optimism, knowing that our world could be turned upside down tomorrow. But we we see a good base of business, and certainly Europe is key to that.
I mean, just from our point of view, firstly, it's really heartening to be told, and I'm told this in Asia as well, that it's it's sometimes Europe worries about their continued relevance and importance in origin markets. And what we tend to forget, and you've just re-emphasized it, is actually it's a really important big business selling Europe in the origin markets. If you take Europe out of the picture, then that's a big hole in people's margins. This is particularly the
Yeah.
case in Asia. This is not the topic of our conversation today, but certainly
Yeah.
we think we've got a problem with not the same volumes of Japanese coming into Europe as they used to. Japan has got a problem with not the same volume of Japanese going to Europe as they used to. So
And
you
Tom,
said,
I would
sorry,
just add, when I say Europe is our bread and butter,
yeah,
so our top 20 countries, based on passenger numbers and sales revenue, 14 out of the 20 are European.
yeah.
And that's been pretty darn consistent. And so you're central to everything.
Well, what a nice sentiment to kick off. What I'll kick off with to hear already in the first thing. Now, people have very kindly sent us some questions and in advance, which is great. And I'm just going to start posing them, if I may, because we're going to have more, I know, coming in online. We've got nearly 200 people in the audience already, and we've got probably another 200 to 300 waiting to see the recording. But very quickly, we've heard. I think these are so complicated. These questions. We're not going to cover them all, but I will skim across them. From waste to wonder, we've got which product types are booking fastest? Escorted tours, FITs, small groups, or tailor-made itineraries. I suppose you can take a pick from that. And the second question is: are travelers prioritizing flexibility or price certainty? Are there any geopolitical, economic, or operational concerns? I think there are so many questions that I
Yes.
don't know how we answer them all. I think the first question just to tackle was which product types do you think are currently on trend? Terry, can I ask you
Well,
that question? Is there any?
yeah. I tell you, sometimes I feel like a broken record, but river cruising is so in demand and will continue to be, I think, in the foreseeable future. And small groups, absolutely. And I don't know. It's just, I feel like I've been talking about multi-generational travel forever, but it seems to strengthen. Those boomers are wanting to take their grandkids and their children on an experience, hopefully to Europe. So some of the basic things, but certainly river cruising continues to dominate, it seems like. Brett,
Brett,
what about
Well, there were a lot of questions in there, but Tom, but the definitely this is not only anecdotal but quantifiable. Small groups is the real takeaway, in my opinion. I'm hearing that from every company type, whether it's escorted, guided touring, the likes of which Travel Corp, Globus, Colette does, where you're doing series blocks, or whether it's component type operators here in Canada, redtag.ca or others who would be packaging car rental, hotel with flights, whatever, or whether it's custom touring, FIT touring, the likes of what, again, I'm referencing companies here in Canada, the likes of GoAway would do. I'm hearing it right across the board that, and of course, small group is also being promoted by organizations like ETOA and ETC in terms of the messaging, right? People are hearing it. People are definitely much more considerate, much more conscious about responsible, regenerative. These things are meaning something now. We talked about them before, but it's really becoming part of the overall travel experience that people are considering when they travel, along with the fact that over tourism is a turnoff. I mean, for in so many ways, right? Um, so for all those reasons, small group touring, I think is, checks all the boxes. And that's, yeah, for me, it's small group touring.
Yep.
I'm not here to question that. I'm just thinking, and maybe I'm showing my age, but the speaking as an old-fashioned group tour operator, which I was uh, before I took over this job many years ago, the idea of focusing on small groups would have been complete anathema to me. You'd have your goal was to get 48 people on a 48-seater coach. Thank you very much. And anything less than that was a lost opportunity. And focusing on breakpoints of below 30 or 32 would have been an admission of failure. Now we're talking about the small groups of 20 to 25 people, and the fixed costs are enormous, and your ability to defray them is quite shocking. Now, so people, what you're saying is this isn't price led in the same way as it used to be. This is, the appeal of being with fewer people is actually, we can defray the cost of that. People are willing to pay that money. Is that what you're saying, Brett?
Well, and Tom, I think the other thing, and we realize this as a company, and I think those I talk to have retention rates are so much higher with small group touring. So yes, there's fixed costs. There's the if you think about it financially, right? One would think we shouldn't be moving in this direction because it's much more difficult to scale, right? But what I think most operators have found is when you consider the retention, the quality scores that you'll receive are so much higher with small group, and that's quantifiable. And the cost of acquisition goes way down because your retention rate goes way up. And so I think that's the driving force and why this small group movement is, pardon the pun, sustainable. Because while there's a huge cost to acquiring new clients, and if you can keep more of them based on the experience that you deliver, then it's offset or even potentially an advantage.
Terry?
Amen. No, Brett is completely correct that the cost of acquisition, sourcing new customers, but having the success of retaining them year over year, that's when you benefit, you profit as a tour operator. So, and you mentioned 20 to 25. I continue to hear 12 to 15. We're talking small groups, but the value is there for people who want that 12 to 15. And so it's here to stay.
Well, we're thinking on to the next question that we've got, which was actually from Visit Scotland, which sorry, I've momentarily lost the questions, but I'll get them back in a second. Just what aspects of responsible travel and tourism resonate most with your audience? Where should where should a destination focus its efforts to ensure that this translates into real demand rather than just sentiment? So, I mean, what do we mean by responsible travel? I think is the question I would float to you. And then which bits of it actually echo with customers? Terry, you start off with, if you may, please.
Okay. Well, I'm proud to say that the vast majority of our USTOA members have a fast and hard sustainability policy that comes from their core culture. So the next hurdle for us is the supply chain and making sure that our suppliers that we partner with share those same values. And I think ultimately, to answer the question from Scotland, is that if the consumer feels that not only does Globus or the travel corporation have this value or set of values, but their entire chain shares that. And therefore, it starts having more impact and meaning if it's the entire experience. Now, we've got a long ways to go as far as bringing our suppliers into the fold. But I think it resonates if there's a sense that all the different pieces, the elements of the experience are meaningful, they're responsible in their actions, and that's good for our industry and it's good for the planet.
Right.
Well, this doesn't all happen overnight. And there's a certain amount of incrementalism to this, right? These conversations that started out 5, 6, 7 years ago, where we're at today, it's taken a long time. But I would say the most important part of this notion of regenerative travel is education. When it's not just what the industry is doing, it's educating why it's important. And when people understand why it's important, they ultimately lean into it. And then it becomes, again, this incrementalism, right? It's not just supplier led or, a few people. It becomes, 2 and 3% all the time. And that creates a movement. Education is a really, really important part of this. When we're talking about authenticity, loving local, when there's these themes, what does that mean? And why is it important? And I could think of so many examples I won't get into right now, but many operators are choosing to include, for example, local produce wherever they go. And that may mean we're not including certain things that are habitual, right? But when you educate people as to why we're including this, why we're not including this, we're supporting local farmers, we're supporting where we are, the region, people begin to nod and begin to understand why, and then they begin to believe it. And then the next time they think about making a trip, they're going to have that in the back of their mind. And it becomes this transformational thing. Again, doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly, but bit by bit. So yeah, I think this, as Terry mentioned, I think this notion of people call it a lot of things, sustainability, regenerative travel, authenticity, whatever it may be, is not being driven by any one side or another, but it's just happening, and we see it, and it's gonna continue.
Mhm. I mean, what you're saying is that this is really almost an essential component in your quality portfolio as an operator. It's a component, but they're not
I,
going to go for an authentic Scottish bothy if what they really want is a five-star hotel. Just sort of being realistic here. I mean, there's levels of authenticity which people will probably shy clear of. And they would prefer to have a hot shower and a private bathroom. Thank you very much, rather than a spade and a 100-yard walk. I think that there are levels of authenticity which we gently gloss over, but there is nevertheless this is an element in what people are requiring. Is that what you're saying?
Tom, there are 1,000 shades of gray. You're
Yeah.
right. But I
Yeah.
think that increasingly there is an expectation whether I'm going to play around a golf uh, and or whether I'm doing some sort of cultural immersion, there is a level of expectation which will be very different. Terry mentioned intergenerational travel, and I think it will be very different between the ages too, right? And generational. So, but I do believe that there is increasingly this level of expectation, whatever level that may be, that you can't ignore.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay. You got a one syllable answer from Mr. Dale. I want to just press you a little bit more on the sentiment side because to me, what is sustainable, and I'm genuinely not questioning you, but I'm just intrigued. I'm sitting there in discussions with city authorities, discussing access to city centres, and I'm going, look, if you really want to cut congestion and you really want to cut emissions and you want to be as sustainable as possible, what you want is 48 people on a 48-seater charter coach. There's nothing, there are very few things that generate such low emissions and reduce congestion. You can put 48 seats as people on bicycles, but if you want to generate congestion, 48 bicycles going down a road is one of the great ways of doing so, I can assure you. So to me, this in some ways is the paradigm model of sustainability and reduction of over-tourism in action, oddly enough, is a sightseeing coach. And you're saying, actually, well, that's not how it's perceived, Tom. This is, what people perceive themselves as doing as being explorers, traveling in small groups with people they know and exploring the destination rather than just seeing the destination, having an experiential time. And I'm saying that a lot of this is sentiment, but that's what sells vacation. So I'm not questioning for one moment that the sentiment's not unimportant. I'm just wondering whether there's a disconnection between the reality of responsible tourism and the appearance of responsible tourism. And I throw that out at you to be shot down if you want, Brett.
Well,
Sorry, Terry.
I am going to use a term that Brett used earlier, and that's education. And I think it's an opportunity for your membership and my membership and CATO. We have a huge education opportunity with whether it's a city council, a regional, county, but we have to somehow get our message about responsible, meaningful travel and its impact. And I just had a government affairs committee call yesterday, and one of the messages that came through very loudly was, you know, you and Tom and Brett need to work more collaboratively together when it comes to whether it's sustainable travel, responsible, however you want to frame it. But I think the opportunity is all around what Brett said, and that's education.
Yeah. We need to take these people on a tour. They need to understand it. This is what we need. This is what we need to do. You need a good tour guide. That's what you need. Okay, next question is the thing that we need to get on to. Right. From Avanti West Coast, a well-known member of everybody, I think. What are the key drivers for transatlantic tourism 26? And what's going to be the impact of the World Cup on the number of journeys made to the UK from USA? Are the airlines seeing specific trends? Well, that's what's the key drivers, and what about the World Cup? Terry, what about the World Cup?
Well, what about the World Cup? So at our congressional caucus this past June, we had Andrew Giuliani, whose father is Rudy Giuliani, and President Trump appointed Andrew as the executive director of the World Cup for the States. And so having a relationship with New York City politics over my career, I invited Andrew to come and speak at our caucus, and he did. Hey, it's going to be massive. It's going to be a challenge, but somehow we always figure it out. And I think it'll be a huge success, but I don't know the impact as far as airline seats and so on and so forth. But um, beyond that,
I know, Brett.
I think what's key is let's have a safe experience for everyone who attends World Cup. You know, that's first and foremost.
Brett.
Yeah, I personally don't see it as I mean, obviously we're all going to be engaged. It's like any mega event, right? It's going to disrupt those places in which it's being housed for sure, and it will create some capacity issues for sure. But on the whole, I don't think it's going to have a material effect in terms of transglobal like travel, the types that we, Terry's members and CATO members do. We're certainly not having, I don't think everyone's seeing any downturn or effect right now. It's something to be considerate of in terms of how we operationalize, right? In terms of, but that would be true of the Olympics too, or wherever. So
Yeah.
it's not really, there's other issues, Tom, that are confounding me right now. World
Yeah.
Cup is not.
No, I tend to agree with you. It's these things, any mega event, and we've got history on this subject. I appreciate, so we need to roll back a little bit. But any mega event uh, causes a disproportionate amount of noise in the tourism sphere. I think when you actually look at what is actually happening, There is a game taking place in a city with a set number of tickets being sold. Very few people, and it occasionally happens, I'm not saying it never happens, it's very unlikely people will be traveling around the United States to be in the city where the game is if they don't have a ticket. And these cities regularly host events where the stadium, we don't talk about the virtue of small events on these things. Maybe we should have expand small football games. But there are very few. None of these cities burst when they hold a national, an American football game or a baseball. You're not dealing with extraordinary crowds here. You're dealing with normal crowds that attend sporting occasions. And so you cannot expect a massive exodus from Europe to witness this, particularly at the prices being asked. I think a lot of people are going to be put off by that. And lastly, I would just merely say that if you want to know about the impact of an event, don't go, particularly the tourism impact of an event, it's best to avoid the person organizing that event. Their job is to sell the dream and the hype, not the reality. And I think you'll find that most destinations that hosted Olympic Games, or World Cups, or any of these huge events see very, very little short-term or even long-term benefit. These places function. What we're dealing with is not tourism; it's the opposite. It's a one-off event, and people are not traveling for the reasons people normally travel for tourism. The last thing I'd say is if you look at in the UK, we have a television program called Match of the Day, which has been broadcast for over 60 years, and no one associates watching Match of the Day with people choosing where to go on holiday. It's not a where to go on holiday program. The World Cup will not be a where to go on holiday event. Okay, on that thought, but are there any trends? Are there any trends we want to know about? Sorry, we've been rude about the World Cup, but we should say we're all looking forward to it. But are there any particular trends you can spot at the moment? What's up? I mean, what destinations are hot? Are there any ones that are cool, but in the wrong sense?
Well,
Brett,
yeah,
to you.
you know what? I'm going to speak the truth again, and I really hope that at some point, uh, um, Terry and I will say the same thing on this. This people-to-people exchange, people are people, right? And I can't wait for the situation between Canada and the U.S. to normalize again, and to see this transborder trend up. And we all have friends, family, people we know and love on both sides. But if I get, a trend that's happening from Canada, and it's quantifiable. Anyone can go on Stats Canada and look at the drop in travel to southbound to the U.S. and see what's trending up. Overseas travel is trending way up from Canada. Overseas travel. Transborder travel is traveling way down. So if I was a hotel, an operator, a destination in Europe right now, I would think the Canadian market is ripe because it's just what's happened. And it's not a pivot anymore. It's not a trend. It's just at this point in time, there's not a lot of appetite to travel to the US, where there would have absolutely have been. And interestingly, even there's been lots of studies out. One of our biggest real estate companies, Royal LePage, did interviewed Canadians who have property in the US, and over half are thinking of selling. Well, that capital then becomes fungible, right? They may choose to buy a home in Canada or elsewhere in Portugal or wherever, Spain, or they may use it to travel. So there's economic uncertainty too. We're Terry and I and then the two countries are involved in the Canada, US, Mexico free trade agreement. Who knows what will happen with that? That could create a lot of uncertainty. What I'm talking about now in terms of the appetite for traveling abroad could, if whatever happens, right, with it, that could create uncertainty. But right now, um, there is a real appetite for Canadians to travel to Europe and elsewhere, but in particular Europe. in a normal year, because travel is endemic to Canadians as it is to Americans, but it is really, really endemic to Canadians. And I used to tell people, and this is true of when Terry and I did the Visit Britain symposium a few months back, Canada is one tenth the size of the US. But then in data, the data speaks for this, and it's often one-fifth the volume. So small market, very robust market. Small market, but very robust. That's what I'll leave you with. I just think there's a great opportunity right now for this market for Europe.
But is there any particular place in Europe you think is looking particularly is surprisingly up or surprisingly down? I mean,
Well, I was just looking at a kayak survey that they
right.
had out for 2026. And one, two, three, four, five, six of the 10 top destinations that people are searching are European.
Well, what's the top destination? I mean, which is one of the
The
people.
top trend, the top trending
Yeah.
destinations in terms of uh, uh, improvement were Berlin and Milan, and the other ones were Zurich, Madrid, Funchal, and Edinburgh.
Wow. Okay. And when you said you were looking at kayak, I thought for one moment you were meaning a canoe of some kind, but now it became
Sorry,
apparent,
that
and
kayak is a search engine. I'm
I,
very
I
sorry. I should have mentioned
I
that.
ought to get out more on the internet. I'm perfectly correct. The Terry, I was just, is there any destination that's particularly up at the moment? Are there any trends worth commenting on?
It's been from our member perspective, it's been relatively consistent. Italy comes out on top every year. France, Spain, they're always in the mix. One may shift from second to third and vice versa. So it's been fairly consistent. I can't say that there's one that's catapulting. Iceland has been trendy the last 5, 6 years, but it's all good news. I don't like to say one's better than the other or one's hotter or less so.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, it's just great to hear that reassurance. It's very difficult to find out. I know if you look at the ETC figures, there are the countries that have seen an explosion in arrivals are Montenegro and Serbia and Albania, and that's mainly because they've dominated the Chinese market because they're the only countries which don't require Chinese to have visas. So I mean, there are ways of bouncing the figures up, but I think what you're saying, Terry, and what you're saying, Brett, is that broadly the old patterns hold firm. The areas that have got real interest, particularly areas where tour operators add value, and they add value if you're going to a destination that you're perhaps not totally familiar with, such as Germany or Italy. You will go to tour operators for assistance in booking in those areas. Okay,
Mhm.
now the question came through. Look, because and this is the first time we've really tackled this head on, and because of the current situation, do North Americans feel welcome in Europe? I mean, should we worry that people are going to stay away from Europe because people are going to um, associate them with current antagonism? Let's put it like that.
Well, I'll take a stab at that.
Yeah.
I referenced earlier that I had a government affairs committee call yesterday, and with what's going on with Greenland, and we need to be prepared to instill confidence in the US traveler that they will be welcome in Europe. I know that this happened to a certain degree, and Brett knows better than I, that call centers last year would get a call and say, am I going to be welcome? Is it going to be awkward and uncomfortable for me? Now, I don't believe we saw cancellations, but calls were being made to be reassured that yes, you're going to feel welcome and you're going to have a great experience. We're entering another level with what's going on in Greenland, with our administration and the way he talks about NATO. So we need to be prepared as an industry to make sure that, and I don't have the answer for this yet, but that we have the right message to keep consumer confidence about traveling to Europe top of mind and reassure them that they're going to feel comfortable. They're going to feel welcome.
And Brett, is a bleed over on that at all for you, or is it just everyone's traveling with confidence?
Well, I echo what Terry said. I think it's important that operationally, I think a lot of operators were worried about commingling when the rhetoric turned up in February and March. And quite frankly, like on the ground, we haven't had any issues. People are people. People want to enjoy each other. They want to, they're looking for the camaraderie. They're looking for diversity. They're looking for a lot of things that the type of travel that Terry's members and CATO offer. So we haven't seen any real issue there. Um, I think it's a few individuals who are creating a lot of hype right now. There's been some strong words in Davos by a lot of people. And I think though I don't think it's going to affect I personally don't think it's going to affect people's opinion of one another. I really do. But I think it will definitely affect travel demand for sure. By that I mean it's not just Greenland, right, Terry? There's been remarks which have been made about Canada and on Twitter with regard to um, uh, one thing or another, right? So I don't think it's going to affect the people-to-people exchange or relationship. Um, but I do think that at least from a Canadian perspective, there are going to be more and more people that when they think about traveling, they're going to be thinking about going to Europe or
Yeah,
elsewhere. I don't think this
agreed.
situation is going to get any better anytime soon. And if it were to stop tomorrow, I think this is baked in already. It's going to take a while. And I also think just because of the advanced purchasing, people are making decisions now that will basically dictate what happens in 2026 and maybe in the first quarter of 2027. I think there's a great opportunity for Europe.
Well, that's heartening, and I think it's a very interesting point you raise about commingling because the information I was hearing is that the only concern that people were expressing is who am I traveling with? You know, the idea that you might be sharing a space with other compatriots who perhaps don't share your point of view was one of the only concerns being expressed through the telephone lines. And I think this is, and the good news is that we've been having commingling people with widely diverging opinions for decades and decades from North America. That's not a problem. We've accommodated. I wouldn't say that we, I
But
don't want to go
Tom,
any further than this, but we've been covering that one for quite a while. Terry,
yeah, I think when you talk about commingling, that's the beauty of travel.
yeah,
You know, we can bridge cultural differences, different opinions, but do it respectful. And we do that in this industry. And I can't think of many other industries that are able to deliver in that kind of fashion.
I'll leave that one hanging in the air. I think it was very beautifully put. Right, we're coming on to the ones that were posed earlier. Some of these questions are so extensive and detailed, I don't even know where to begin. But from the how far, I mean, this is almost 101, which is really good. How important is the stock market? How important is the currency to demand?
It's important. I
Brett,
have, and Brett can comment better than I can, but I have a certain segment of my members, the tour operator members, that as the stock market goes, so do bookings. So if you have a quiet downward spiral, the phone stopped ringing, and it's very much tied into that stock market. Um, and I don't know what percentage of my members, but I hear it anecdotally quite a bit.
And Terry, I can say it no better, by the way. You said it perfectly. I can say it from a different perspective in that um, the Canadian dollar obviously does not have the purchasing power of the US dollar, right? Against strong currencies like the euro and the franc and the US dollar. So there was a comment in the chat doesn't make, yeah, I mean, currency makes a big difference for anyone, right? Um, but for Canadians, we're already coming at this when we're thinking about traveling to Europe at a decided disadvantage in terms of the foreign exchange, right? Um, Having said that, we're used to it because we were used to that prior to the all the issues we've been talking about today, whether we went to the US, drove over the border, flew over the border, went to Europe, or many other, the Canadian dollar is not a very strong currency. So, um, and I referenced this too in terms of I think a lot of what will be happening in terms of the renegotiation or discussion around Kuzma and the economic effect of that and the effect of that on the Canadian dollar will have impact. But to what extent, I'm not sure. But it is a factor. Foreign exchange for sure is a factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was very, very straightforward. More intriguingly, there's a really good question. I'm just going to have to pick ones at random because we've got so many questions coming in. Don't stop them, but we've got so many. I know we're not going to go through them all, so don't be disappointed. But are you seeing a long-term shift towards later bookings? People have been talking that the decision lead time, which is the great buzzword for certainly tour operator sales, was starting to shrink. Has it shrunk? And what is the point at which you start seeing products sold in North America? You were saying at one stage, Sherry, it was a 10-month sweet spot. Is it really a 10-month sweet spot? More like 8 or 6, or could it even be a last minute.com kind of choice? Terry, you go first,
Well,
please.
yeah, our survey said it's shortening, but we didn't have by how much. So, uh, yes, it's becoming that window is getting shorter. I think there are some kind of spontaneous decisions saying, hey, let's go to Europe wherever, kind of last minute. But I think that booking window is shortening from the traditional 10 months that we've seen before. Brett, what do you see?
Yeah, Terry, I would say it's creeping inward a bit. And this whole thing about incrementalism, right? Right now, it's not material really, but if it were to continue, it could be. Um, and I think the fact that there might be a lot of reasons why people would want to book later as opposed to what they might traditionally. Tom, and it gets back to it could be, and this is just off the top of my head, but as we move into, as we build talking about small group experiences too, it could be that the time that you want to go, there's not as much inventory anymore too, right? So um, if you're talking about groups of 12 or 14 or 16, they can fill up much more quickly than 40 or more. So, but on the whole, there's a lot of factors that influence when people book. But and it is when we're spending money, we're still spending money. That travel intention for most of our members is a year or more out, and the point of booking is within that 10 to 8 month, 7 month area. So you need to be, in terms of that travel intention, you need to be where the consumer is, well outside of that booking period. So
Is this? I mean, I'm intrigued. I'm assuming, and I may be wrong in my assumption, that the old golden weeks of the 6 weeks after, or the week of, and the 5 weeks after Labor Day, the whole of September and the first couple of weeks in October were the high volume peak season for Americans coming to Europe. And if you were a customer and you're wanting to travel during those periods, you would have booked pretty early for that because they'll sell out. And I know group blocks couldn't be secured um, in in September, October, if you tried to do so 12 months in advance. I mean, these were peak selling opportunities. Is that still the case, Brent? I mean, is there still a long the lead time on the peak season?
well, I think there's a long lead time on all seasons. That booking window is the same regardless of when you're traveling, right?
Okay.
I think the difference So in terms of the booking period, I'm not hearing that there's any difference based on when people are traveling. I think the one difference for many operators is yes, that September October time period was a busy time for people to travel, and that we've I think this has been supply driven, but what we've all been focused on is leveling that out, right? That doesn't help anyone. You don't hire for that peak period, you hire for some median. And so what I'm hearing, and this is true of my own company, is where the company I work for, is that we're really focused on that sort of April, May, June, even March time periods where there is interest, there is intent, and then it becomes either a pricing or an offer strategy. And we're seeing a lot of movement and a flattening of when people are traveling.
Yeah, I agree with Brett. I would also say, in the best interest of your customer experience, September, October probably isn't optimal for the customer experience because of the numbers of people visiting whatever the European country is. So I have definitely seen what Brett described, a leveling out. Shoulder season becomes more attractive because you can actually exhale and enjoy the destination. So I think that's a trend that we will continue to see build.
Well, we hope so. It was, if I may just take a moment's commercial break. I mean, we have a shoulder and off-peak initiative called SHOP, which is taking place in the middle of summer. Of course, that's the time we had to hold it. It's called SHOP, Shoulder and Off-Peak, and there's going to be a workshop and plenty of discussions on this very topic. Um, I'm just intrigued, just trying to open up some more. Got loads of questions on FX. There's a question for, well, I mean, Terry's partly covered this already, but looking ahead, what is your forecast for European river cruise demand? Brett, I mean, you haven't had a word on this angle, but river cruises, for reasons which we're very familiar with, looks like it's going well. Would you agree?
Totally agree. I think it's a very, very attractive way to travel. And we're seeing more river cruises introduced every year, more and more demand. So yeah, no, I don't have any numbers around that, but I can tell you that within the market and here, river cruising is extremely popular.
Terry, you already covered it.
I, I, Well, I would just say, yes, it's extremely popular. It's a wonderful way to travel. But I do think our industry has to be cognizant of how do we manage this? Because, when you go into some ports and you walk through six different vessels that are all there at the same time, this over tourism, we need to make sure we're cognizant of that customer experience again. Because Brett's absolutely right. Every year, we're seeing more and more inventory and more attractive ships, but we need to be somewhat sensitive to that customer experience.
And this is partly in response to a leading National Tourist Office's publicity campaign. But is the demand rising in North America for set jetting, as they're now calling it, which is travelers wanting to go and see a movie and TV locations? And is this a trend you're witnessing, or is this I won't what the appalling? Is there a trend for this? I think I'll leave that question as a single question rather than an alternative. Brett, do you see people going, "Hey, we got to go there. We've seen it on James Bond or La Dolce Vita or something, whatever."
Well, there's no doubt. I must admit, I don't have any data behind this. I'm sure others do. It's mentioned time and time again by the likes of Visit Britain and others. And obviously, where there is filming, there is going to be interest, right? Because people are passionate about what they watch and the time they spend, and there would be a certain portion that want to see where it's made. So there's no doubt about it that it's if you have that in your backyard, it's going to be attractive. And then it can almost become another issue in terms of over tourism, right?
Yeah.
It can be
Right.
very appealing in terms of promotion, but then you can have the same issue over and over again. So, Terry?
Yeah, I don't have any data either, but certainly you look at a destination like Dubrovnik and there's a lot of interest, but it becomes to the point where it's over tourism coupled with, the cruise ships that come in. But they've managed the cruise ship piece of that. But I think, yeah, there's certainly appears to be demand that's generated, certainly awareness that's generated from whether it's movies or TV shows. I just don't have any data on what the extent of it is.
And yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. I mean, you wouldn't in North Wales, to give one example, I don't think you'd see the crowds that you see at Port Meidian, which is a model village by Clough Williams-Ellis, were it not for the cult TV series The Prisoner, which was aired back in the 1960s. And there are numerous examples of this dotted around. So I think it undoubtedly motivates people to stop and look. Whether it motivates people to travel across continents is another matter entirely. But there are two categories, I imagine, of attraction. One, the things that lead people to a destination, the other thing that gives them something to do when they're in that destination. The topic of
Well,
which
it's also it's also interesting, Tom, when you look at, you know, Taylor Swift's concerts or Beyonce, and fans do follow, and they do have an economic impact,
yeah.
and I assume that's only going to continue.
Yeah, I agree. So you can look at culture. Well, I tell you what an amazing intervention. I'm lost for words at the idea of Taylor Swift being introduced in this, but you're quite right, of course. Excellent. If you thought this was going to be Swifties own, you're wrong, guys. Anyway, last question. Do you still see first-time visitors that want to see and visit bucket list? I mean, is the bucket list still important as a factor? I suppose is the question. I mean, Brett, do you think bucket list visits are still driving demand?
Short answer is yes. I mean, there are people that want to go and whatever it may be. Again, there's a thousand shades of gray. We try and find our spot where we should be, and every operator is going to have that in terms of where they go and the type of travel and what they do. I would just go back to the point that even if there is a bucket list, right, people are being much more considerate. I believe people are being much more considerate with regard to where they travel, how they travel, um, and that will be woven into the fabric of either their, who they choose to travel with, where they go, and how they go. So yes, the bucket list is still alive and well. And that's part of the live entertainment, right? That's part of the live entertainment we were just talking about. Live
Mhm.
entertainment is a huge business for sure, whether it be Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or anything else.
Yep.
So
Bad Bunny. So
Terry,
I would like to jump in on the bucket list. It is alive and it does drive a certain amount, but I personally don't like the bucket list. And here's why. Because as a tour operator or a destination, it's about creating a relationship with that customer. And a bucket list to me implies you check the box, been there, done that, move on, and never potentially come back. So I'm just like, I don't worry about whether you're a bucket list destination or not. It's building a connection, a relationship with that traveler.
gentlemen, we've more or less run out of time. And I've got the last minute here just to say thank you so much. We've thrown up ideas that are actually genuinely contentious, and we could sit down and discuss over tourism or misplaced tourism as people, or unbalanced tourism as people wish to call it. We could look at bucket lists and the importance otherwise. We've barely touched on the whole great roller coaster, to use a metaphor, of experiential tourism as to what on earth that means. And as if going to see, to use the bucket list, the Sistine Chapel for the first time is not an extraordinary experience. It is an extraordinary experience, but it is also on the bucket list. So there are some Interesting issues floating around out there. But thank you so much, Brett. Thank you so much, Terry, for sparing your time. It's been genuinely informative, genuinely interesting for me. I'm sure it has been for the audience. And thank you, audience, for being there. So thank you, everybody involved in this. Very much look forward to talking again. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.